When I went through the answers that people had given me regarding the struggles that they have in relationship, the first one was, it was kind of toss up. Like there were three main areas. One was attachment issues. People have more awareness of that. So somebody will go, I know I'm avoidant. I'm struggling to create long-term relationships. Family patterns, at least from a constellation perspective, I'm looking at some of the answers and going, I know what's behind that one. So some of the things were family patterns that we're struggling with. Communication was the second largest cluster of self-expression, negotiating, creating agreements, setting boundaries, all of these things that have communication as kind of their issue were also, that was kind of like number two. And the third one really was self-regulation, triggers. How do I manage either myself or my partner in terms of making the relationships I'm in work. So those were kind of the three clusters that people struggle with. I mean, there's other things as well, so I don't want to minimize those. But it was interesting to see how much family patterns, our early learning figures in, how much we aren't really equipped with the communication tools we need, and knowing how to regulate ourselves and the other person was not something that we got from our experiences and families. So I'm going to end the poll right now. But thank you very much, those of you that, and I'll put the results up here so you can see. Maybe, there you go. Just if you want to watch that. That's kind of how it's shaken out. These are pretty common numbers in terms of what I see in my work. People and who shows up to do the work, all of that kind of thing. I heard recently from John and Julie Gottman, who are researchers in this field, that women are more unhappy in the relationships that we have now than men, statistically speaking. And that's represented right here. So right in front of your screen, right here we are. Let's see, I'm going to make sure that I'm shown on here. So we're going to tackle this topic, and you have not seen a poll. I'm not sure why some folks are not seeing the poll. I apologize. Anyway, it's not a big deal. I just thought you might enjoy seeing what I saw in those results. So I'm going to share some slides, and we're going to go through some of the understandings I have. And then I'm also, before we end today, I'm going to give you two tools. Two skills you can take with you. So there's something that you can take from this webinar and use immediately in your relationships. So hopefully everyone can see my slides. When I go to slides, it's harder for me to see the chat. So if I'm missing something on the chat, please unmute and speak up. I will be doing my best to track that. So as you probably know, relationships have changed. We are, in the past 70 years, more or less, we have moved from roles and rules being the source of what regulated our relationships. So there were gender norms and fairly rigid rules, even in the 1950s, where this photo is taken from. And that worked for people for whom those roles fit. But of course, it didn't work for everyone, and there's a lot of potential that was suppressed in these role and rule-based relationships. But it did provide structure, and it did provide regulation for us. And originally, marriage had to do with economic and social survival. Love had very little to do with it. If you liked the person you got connected to, that was nice, but you didn't always have a lot of choice either. If you're in a small village, there wasn't a lot of options who you could be with. And by ensuring that the means of reproduction, that is women, were not self-sufficient or able to control their reproduction, and it was like birth control, this system could be stable. So it was a stable system. It lasted a very long time. And I don't think we realized how revolutionary the pill was. That when women could work and when they had the means of control over their own reproduction, it undermined this particular social structure that most of us in the West are familiar with. So that leaves us with a bit of a problem. What regulates our relationships now? Who decides the roles and who decides the rules? So we don't have those institutionalized structures to fall back on, which means, and love will only get you so far, as most of us have found out by now. It will only get you so far, right? It won't take you through the whole journey. And without enough skill, without the interpersonal skills that we need, love can turn to hate. And we end up separating and divorcing. Now, unlike those Victorian era, images I showed you, we have a lot of choices, right? You can get on an app and swipe. And instead of making us happier, and instead of that really working for us, it tends to work against us. And there's good research that shows that when we're confronted with too many choices, we freeze. We have a hard time and we worry. We get anxious about choosing the wrong thing. So there's the famous study that was done, that was the jam test, where they had a supermarket and they had like 24 different jams displayed, and then they had another display with 6 jam options. So you could have strawberry or blackberry, whatever. The 24 jam display got a lot of interest, but people didn't buy. With the 6 jams, people would buy one. It wasn't too much. It was enough. There's this idea of satisficing. It's a good enough option. And it turns out that's a more sure route to happiness than enormous a number of choices. And so our current setup, the structure that we have now for finding and choosing mates, instead tends to send us on a search for the mythical perfect soulmate that will complete us and make us happy. Alas, this is a fairy tale. Relationships take work. It takes a lot of effort. It takes skill. And unfortunately, we find ourselves moving from hierarchical, role-based relationships to democracy, right? We're now showing up in our relationships as equals in peer-to-peer kinds of relationships, without the manual, without the instruction set of like, how do we do that? No place in school did they say, okay, now when you get into intimate relationships, here's the skills that you're going to need. Like, that was not a subject that was covered. And so we're kind of overwhelmed with choice. We're filled with anxiety about making the wrong choice. And we're trying to fill in the gaps that are left from the lack of these institutions that told us what to do. So we're struggling to figure out how to create these different kind of relationships. We're pretty used to hierarchical relationships. We have parent-child, teacher-student, boss-employee. The closest thing we have is friendship. And a lot of us, as we're finding out in the research on loneliness, struggle with that. We didn't get good models. We don't know how to do it. It's harder now. So this is the setup that we go into creating relationship with right now, trying to manage the difficulty of close personal relationships. So just to kind of compare, we have an older system where the social circles you had to choose from were small, the roles were given, the social economic classes were fairly stable and reproduced. You tended to marry people in your own social economic class through religion and marriage. Economic survival was the motivation, and you didn't need a whole lot of interpersonal skills as long as you followed the rules. But now our social circles are international and internet-wide. The roles have to be negotiated, and different people from those different places have vastly different ideas. Economics are still a factor, but those institutions have a lot less influence. And we are often seeking love. I put that in quotes, whatever that means to you. So that means a lot of interpersonal skill is going to be needed to make this thing work. We're kind of, drifting in a different zone. So I have a question for you. How did you learn to behave in close relationships? Where did you learn what you know how to do? Somebody put it in the chat. Where did you learn how to behave in close personal relationships? Where did you get your instruction manual? Therapy. That's the second manual. Family, right, with my mom, okay, right. From my parents, from, family of origin and grandparents, by observing our parents. Sometimes we have books, by watching movies, media popular images, right? We're kind of, some of us have had training, good for you, right? Trial and many errors, indeed, right? Shared community, sometimes we have a community that can support us, that's wonderful. But basically, the place that most of us learn our relationship, family of origin therapy. Family of origin is usually the first manual we get, right? And a lot of what we learn in our families is unconscious. We don't know that we're learning it. It becomes part of our automatic systems. It's like, there's an automatic set of logic, like, this is how we do holidays, right? What do you mean you don't have a Christmas tree? To our partner, right? What do you mean you serve beef on Thanksgiving? Like, I'm just picking on the holidays, but there's all these unconscious things that happen, and they get embodied. They get sent into our automatic systems, and it isn't until we encounter someone who has a different set of rules, different set of values, that we discover our own. And so this also, as I say, a lot of people come to me and they want to fix their picker. They want to fix the selection mechanism they have for choosing a mate. This is also very often driven by family, because we choose what is familiar, not necessarily what we need. This is what I call the foo factor, the family of origin factor, right? It shapes a lot of what we do in relationship. And the rub here is that the body is fast. You don't have to think about what you say. Right? You don't have to think about what you do. If we had to actually think before every word came out of our mouth, or we had to, think about what we were going to do, like picking up a spoon, we'd never get through a day. So the body is fast. Most of what you do, some 90+%, is automated. And that's good. That's good news, right? Until we're in a fight with our partner. And then those automatic patterns might not be so helpful because they have a set too. And we're going to find ourselves triggered. We're going to find ourselves reacting. We're going to be fighting about small things that are linked to these deeper patterns that we have. So the mind is actually slow. It takes a while for the prefrontal cortex to get the news, decide what to do with it, and react. And the difference between reaction and response is being able to get that mind involved. So that means we're going to have to find a way to do that, to be able to think before we act, at least in the middle of that fight with our partner. So one of the ways I've described this is what I call the maturity project. And some of you who know me have seen my little drawing here. Inside of this is the little innocent child, and almost all of us have some kind of wound or some kind of challenge that we faced in our childhood that's left some scar tissue perhaps. And so starting about age 5 on, we start to make adaptations. We might try to control everything as a way of making ourselves feel safe. Or we might learn that if we yell and scream, people will give us what we want. We come up with some kind of adaptation. This is really a pseudo-self. It's not our mature self. It's not an adult self. It's not really integrated, the prefrontal cortex, our thinking part. It's still going a bit off of automatic responses, reactions to the childhood experiences that we had. Maturity comes when we're actually able to embrace all of these parts. We're able to bring our higher level reasoning and our deeper intuition to the way that we behave. With compassion. It turns out in the research that self-compassion is the foundation of self-esteem. So if we've had difficulty or criticism as a child, we probably don't have enough kindness towards ourselves to be kind to our partner. So, many of you mentioned therapy as how you've learned to do relationships better. This is part of the learning, is getting kind of outside of our own automatic patterns and being able to look at them. And which is one of the reasons that I love constellation work, is because it lets us see what we're doing and what our responses, our automatic patterns are. So it's not your fault if you're struggling, really. No one gave you the keys, right? We're in this massive transition right now. It's like a huge social experiment that we're doing. And we haven't been given the skills or the practice to a chance to automate the skills that we need for great relationships. So what are some of those skills? Well, self-regulation, self-knowledge, being able to manage my own activation and arousal, knowing myself, knowing what I want and need, being able to communicate that clearly and respectfully, and including, where I'm disagreeing with the person. No, I don't think we should have beef on Thanksgiving dinner, whatever it is, right? We're disagreeing over something, which means that I have to be able to negotiate. I have to know how to negotiate, how to compromise and maintain fairness. I have to have problem-solving skills. To be in a two-self system instead of a one-self system, me, right? I can manage me. But to be with another self that's as real as me, a two-self system, I will need a generative mindset. I will need to be generous. Because when we're doing the tango close up and personal, we're likely to step on each other's toes. It's going to take some generosity to do that. I have to have clarity around what I value and what my life goals are. I can't tell you how sad it is when I start working with a couple and I find out that they're sitting on a deal breaker. Like, we can't, one of us wants a child really bad, the other doesn't, absolutely against it. Like, that is not going to be resolved. And we will go to great lengths to put off the pain, the heartbreak that's there, rather than be able to deal with and part in a good way. Somebody wants to live in France, somebody wants to live in Alabama. These are not compatible. We can't both do both. So having clarity myself around what I value, what my life goals are, what I want to have done or seen or experienced before I go to my grave. If there's disagreement there, we're not aligned on these things, we're going to have trouble. We're going to be in conflict and we may not even know what we're fighting over. So being able to have alignment, to have common ground, to be able to get on the same bus, to be able to create a shared set of rules of how we're going to run a household. Whether the dirty socks on the floor eventually make it to the hamper. These kinds of things are small, but they matter. I had a friend of mine who once said that she knew people that she could love but not live with. And she knew people she could live with but didn't love. And she knew she found the right person when she found someone she could love and live with, right? So we have to be able to manage the day-to-day and the close personal. It takes flexibility. It takes resilience. And we also need to be able to do what I call adulting, which is to be able to become aware of those family of origin factors, to work with our attachment and trauma history, to be able to turn into the things that we know for ourselves that are creating difficulties in our relationship. So if you look at the list, you can see there's not a lot of places in your life where somebody handed you this manual. There's not a lot of places where we're taught these so that this is our automatic set of responses. So it's understandable that we're going to struggle, right? And love isn't not necessarily, it's not going to be enough. We have to have skill. Before we get to the 2 skills I want you to practice today, I'll just mention that I have been working with couples for over 20 years now. And I've begun to realize that there are some pivotal skills. And these are what I call micro skills. They're not necessarily big, things, but they're skills that give us leverage. In other words, there's a few communication skills that if we master those, and those become our go-to, these are things that are know-how, They become things we use and do. They're not know what. We've automated these responses. They make a huge difference in relationship. They change our approach to our partner. They change the response of the partner to us. Now, you can be single right now and still get these skills and make sure that your next relationship is different. You can be in a couple and both of you can take, start upskilling, if you will. Or you can be just one part of a couple and start mastering these skills yourself. It will affect your partner. It will affect their response. When we're in relationships living this close, we're in what we call it, from a systems point of view, a tightly coupled system, which means that you're going to respond to my response, and I'm going to respond to your response to me. And this circularity is what builds the patterns in our relationship that are either functional or dysfunctional. So the good news is, if I change my response, you're likely to respond differently too. So each of us have a lot of influence on the way our relationship goes. So there's 5 short and hopefully fun little courses inside this program. The first one is myth busting. Hollywood has not served us well. They either show us going off into the sunset or the meltdown at the end. They don't really show us how to function in the middle of a relationship to be successful most of the time. So there's a lot of myths that we've all kind of bought into that we need to bust so that we are, they're damaging. So these are myths that once we kind of change our expectations and thoughts, will give us a much better chance at happiness. The second course is really important and it's rarely discussed, even in the research, which is, are we on the same bus? Do our values and life goals align sufficiently for us to be able to construct a life together? And this one gets overlooked all the time, and yet it's super consequential. And unfortunately, if we don't have this sorted out, we can go years down the road before we find out we are sitting on a deal breaker. And that's heartbreaking. The other is some really basic, essential, I say basic, but they're often not that well known, essential communication skills. And the ability to successfully have difficult conversations, things where we're in conflict. And finally, in enhancing joy, really being able to enjoy our relationship and enjoy our partner. So these are the 5 little courses. There's about 5 modules in each one, 5 lessons in each one. And we're forming the cohort right now, so it's going to launch in January. So if you want to be part of that, put your name in the chat, and we'll contact you when we've got all the software working. So I want to turn to this first skill. Now you'll notice there were 3 clusters that showed up, this whole thing around attachment and family of origin, communication, and regulation. And without the rules and roles to regulate us, we have to be able to bring more self-regulation to the table. And if you can't think, you can't talk, at least not coherently. So the problem is when we get triggered, when something hits us and we go into reaction, we will stop breathing well. This is an automatic fear response. It's a threat response, where we will go into high, shallow breathing. As soon as we do that, we send our brain the message, danger, danger, look out, right? And our thinking brain will go offline.